Hello and welcome back to the Stellaris Lore Stories. So lots and lots of things have happened with the release of the Contingency. Wait, no, I mean the Synthetic Dawn DLC. Well yes, this DLC has added the Contingency. And so with this new DLC, I will try to cover everything over the coming weeks. It will be rather difficult and I will kind of need your help in the comments, so if you have a topic, throw it down below and I will cover it. First up, of course, I should cover a topic asked about in the comment section. What is the origin of the Contingency? Now, the Contingency has only recently been added into the game, and I have limited experience of playing as them, or against them in fact, meaning that I cannot 100% comment about this particular bit of lore. However, I can certainly make a few judgments. The first theory I propose is the Cybrix theory. Now I am sure you have all seen my lore video about the Cybrix precursors, as the remainder of this theory requires a little bit of outside context. As mentioned in the previous lore video, the Cybrix are a race of AI synthetics that rose up against their creators and conquered most of the galaxy. However, an event occurred resulting in the Cybrix changing their ways and going from hating life to actually loving life and protecting it. As a result, the Cybrix were retreated from the galaxy back to their alpha homeworld, which was a massive ring world. From then on, they were later discovered and completely destroyed. Also, we fought until this DLC came along. This DLC has added a feature so that if the Contingency conquer 20% of the galaxy within, I think it is the first 10 years, I do believe, then the Cybrix will make a return. They will suddenly spawn in a new system around the Beta Cybrix homeworld, another absolutely massive ring world, and the Cybrix will pour out with many fleets and fleets of navies willing to fight on against the Contingency, and well, it's kind of a close fight. But what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that for a start, the Cybrix aren't necessarily dead. Even though they're precursors, they for some reason happen to have the ability to just materialize out of nowhere with a brand new ring world. The Cybrix also have the ability to leave immediately after, so once the Contingency are destroyed, the Cybrix just up and leave and go to a different galaxy perhaps. So who knows what's going on there? Anyway, the Cybrix have noticed the Contingency and see them as a threat to the life in the universe. However, perhaps the Cybrix and the Contingency are more closely linked. The Cybrix, for example, when they pulled out of the galaxy, left a lot of their technology behind. And their technology, if you haven't noticed, is very similar to that of the Contingency. So my guess is one of the many enlightened empires that the Cybrix were fighting took parts of the Cybrix equipment and reformatted it into the Contingency that we all know. So what I mean by this is the Cybrix left a lot of technology behind, meaning that one of the empires they're attacking was able to take it and consequently make robots out of them, and these robots became the Contingency. Now, as the Contingency state themselves, they're there to stop a type of anomaly from occurring. Who knows what that anomaly is? However, they were left by a race of enlightened individuals that self-terminated themselves. A bit like what the Cybrix supposedly did. They did self-terminate themselves back into one part of the galaxy. So, what I believe has happened is one of the empires that the Cybrix were fighting took their technology, made the Contingency, became enlightened, realized that they were heading for some kind of cataclysmic event, and then set the Contingency up to stop anyone else from making this mistake in the future. Now, evidently a couple of errors have occurred as the Contingency seemed to fire slightly early. Whatever this event is, we are certainly not exactly close to it, or maybe we are. We can't be too certain, but I think it's fair to say, considering that the empire that the Cybrix were fighting against were losing against the Cybrix, but still survived, they must be quite a bit more advanced than we are when we actually encounter the Contingencies several hundred years into our game. So it's fair to say that, well, this cataclysmic event will be massive and could be added in as a very much far late game feature. Who knows what it could be, although I do have some other theories. Anyway, so that is the Cybrix theory, the idea that the Cybrix have inadvertently caused the Contingency to occur. Now there are a fair few problems with this, and I'm sure you will tell me all about them in the comments. It is great to have your own view, and I suggest you be very vocal about it, and make sure to challenge others, because you don't want people to get away with saying something stupid like the Contingency was actually caused by those communist gas people. Oh Christ, what a great theory. Okay, maybe I should actually cover that one. Anyway, second theory. This is the end cycle theory. Now, this wasn't exactly explained much, but it was left by a commenter on a video a few weeks back. This commenter basically reached the conclusion that the cataclysmic event that the contingency are protecting us from is the end cycle. So this would mean that the contingency were developed by a spiritualist empire and set about to stop anyone from spawning in the Eater of Worlds or going down any of the shroud paths to accidentally cause the end of the galaxy. Now, I have a slight problem with this theory already, and that is because psionics and the main people that go for the end cycle crisis, they can't actually really build robotics because you have to be religious. And religious people, guess what? They aren't a big fan of these AIs, especially not these contingency types that like to destroy loads of life. So it's fair to assume that whoever has made this might not necessarily have linked it to the end cycle. However, they might have been aware of the end cycle. So maybe they weren't themselves going towards this event, but they thought that it could have been a potential risk. Now, I'm not saying that the end cycle isn't the cataclysmic event that the contingency are defending themselves from. It is entirely possible, but it's just unlikely. The fact that an empire that can manufacture robots can also cause the end cycle. And time for our third theory. This is the unbidden theory. Now, once again, this is a crisis linked to another crisis, as Paradox does like to do. As many of you have mentioned, the fact that perhaps the unbidden are actually the hunters, and to all of you I say, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but personally, not for me. I prefer something bigger. Anyway, this is the theory that perhaps the contingency is set up to stop you from researching the jump drive technologies. So, as you get closer to the jump drive technologies, the contingency get a little bit scared. You're progressing yourself to cause an event, a singularity. Who knows what it could actually be? Now, this certain event we of course know to be the spawning of the unbidden. They come to your galaxy, they absolutely ravage it, and it will be almost utterly destroyed, unless you fight against it, of course. So perhaps the contingency is set up to stop the unbidden from spawning. Perhaps the contingency fear the unbidden. Perhaps they simply just don't know who to fear. Now, it would make sense the fact that a technology advanced nation that has built a lot of robots would also research jump drive technologies, and consequently would use the robots to prevent this. Perhaps they caught wind from the other empires that the unbidden were waiting and preparing for an attack at any moment, and consequently destroyed themselves and all of their technology so no one else could follow them. Now, personally, I don't know if this is possible. It could be a thing, but my main problem with this is, of course, the fact that you can't have multiple crises firing in one game. We can't have the AI crisis and the unbidden crisis at the same time. So, once you beat the AI crisis, there's nothing to stop you from researching jump drive technologies, and consequently, the unbidden can't come and attack you. So that would mean that in that universe, the jump drive technology actually meant nothing, and the unbidden quite simply almost don't exist. Now, this final theory is probably the closest and most sound theory that I have so far. This is the theory about robotics. It's similar to the Cybrix theory, but this is ever so slightly different. Basically, imagine an empire that has built vast amounts of robots. What happens after that? Well, something might go wrong, and you might have something occurring like the Cybrix, a race of AI and synthetics that have risen up against their previous masters and absolutely slaughtered almost all of the galaxy. They became too powerful. They worked towards something that quite simply wasn't possible, the extermination of all life everywhere. Now, they might have achieved it, and who knows what that would entail. But perhaps this empire that was building a lot of robots realized the error, that perhaps building loads of robots causes something in the future. Who knows what it is? So they set up the contingency, quite ironically another group of robots, to fight against them. So a group of robots set up to stop you from building too many robots. This does make sense because of course the AI crisis is influenced by the amount of synthetics you have currently active in your universe. So if there are too many robots going on, the contingency detects this, notices that perhaps these empires are becoming too developed, getting too close to the singularity involving robots, and consequently deploys and tries to wipe out the rest of the galaxy. Now, this would make sense because what is the best way to defeat a robot? Well, another robot of course, because it can take that robot and change it to fight for itself. So effectively they built the perfect defender. A group of robots that can simply keep resupplying themselves on the dead robots of the enemies they are trying to kill. Anyway, so that's it for all of my theories today. If you have any other theories, then feel free to drop them in the comments. I would love to have a chat with all of you. Anyway, there's a few other potential ideas out there, like perhaps the fallen robotic empire has something to do with the contingency. They probably didn't make them, but they might have been around at the time when it occurred. Perhaps the contingency are linked to the custodian project. This custodian project that protects people, and this contingency that is supposedly meant to protect against something. So maybe they're all linked. Maybe there's an additional link that can be made to, guess what? The Hunters. That's right, I threw that name in there just to cause a bit of drama. Who knows what would occur? Because if the contingency was set up to defeat the Hunters, well, I think Paradox is building to something. And I really hope that they are, and I expect it to be absolutely bloody massive. Anyway, I hope to see all of you in the next one. Feel free to leave a like. If you want any more kind of lore videos, then I suggest you probably subscribe and watch the playlist I've already made. Anyway, see you all in the next one.